Welcome to another episode of the Bible Toolbox. I'm Lydia.
And I'm Luke, and we're here to help you enjoy the Bible through the tools that scholars and programmers have created for you. So last time we talked about the different contexts of word studies. And so now we are going to do an example to try to show how to do a word study using hope.
So a word study on hope.
Word study on hope.
Using all of our contexts.
All right,
here we go.
So I kept all of the original slides. Okay, so here's our original slide. Remember, we're doing concentric circles, starting with the passage. Then we're looking at how the word is used in the New Testament as a whole, to the Old Testament, Greek Old Testament, Papyri, Greco-Roman, so on. So for the passage, here's what we had. There's lexicon, Louw-Nida, and so on. So going to Thayer's.
And this is on Blue Letter Bible?
Blue Letter Bible.
Under the lexicon.
So if we scroll down to the lexicon, this is what we get.
Did you just type in hope to get here? Or you found a verse that had hope in it, clicked on it, and this is the page it brought you to?
And there's two main words in Greek for hope. The noun and the verb, elpis and elpizo. So here's a lexicon. You can see it. It gives all different forms and stuff. And this can be hard to read sometimes.
Especially if you don't know Greek.
So up here, outline of biblical usage is pretty much the same information, just without all of the text and stuff. But it doesn't give you the verses. So you kind of have to go back down here and find, the verses that it says. But the point to point out here, so the expectation of evil and fear, it has that as its first definition.
For hope,
right? But notice that there is only one use of it in the whole Bible. So this was in older Greek works, the word elpis just meant like expectation. So expecting something, and it could be good or bad. And by the time of the biblical times, it's pretty much always used as good expectation.
So the word just evolved over time.
Yeah. So that gives a little evidence of its evolution. And so, but yeah, you can see mostly it is what we say is hope. So joyful and confident expectation of eternal salvation.
And is this the noun or is this both?
This is the noun. And something to point out here is that it can be used in the sense of, having hope, but it can also be used as like a concrete noun or in an objective sense. So the thing hoped for, like, oh, my hope has arrived, type of thing. Okay.
Rather than what's an example of the other way?
I have hope that something will happen.
Okay.
So it's used in a more kind of verbal sense, in the sense of an expectation.
Versus something that you have.
Versus like, we look to Jesus, our hope. Right? It's almost it's like equating Jesus and hope.
Yes. It's more of a noun.
Yeah.
Like it's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah.
Okay.
For the verb here, we scroll down.
When it says verb at the top.
Yes,
so we know if
right
it's
here.
the noun or the verb one.
Yep, right there, verb. And you get similar thing. To hope, wait for salvation, hopefully trust in. Okay. So nothing too much more interesting here. So that's Thayer's lexicon.
Talking about passage-wise?
Yep.
Okay.
And so next is comparing it with synonyms, or like, what are all the synonyms of hope? So right here, I went to a passage, clicked hope.
So in Louw-Nida.
And clicked on the section 25, 59 to 64, which is on hope, look forward to.
Nice.
And we get all of these words. And so then what I did is I went and looked up all these words, kind of what we did with the lexicon, and looking at their different meanings and comparing and contrasting them to El Piso and El Pis.
Kind of just getting more of a broad sense of what this word could mean and similar words to it.
Yep. So we will go more into my findings there. Another thing on Blue Letter Bible that we have, this is on the noun here, this Trench's synonyms, which goes over different synonyms. And one of them they give is the synonym of faith. And wonderfully, it gives you a quote from Augustine, all in Latin.
Nice.
So I copied and pasted this into ChatGPT and said, translate this, and it translates it. Nice. It's my favorite ancient language translator at this point. And how he distinguishes faith and hope is that hope only refers to things in the future, where faith or trust is trusting in God, past, present, future. Like it's not bound to time, where hope is only something in the future.
Interesting.
Okay. So that's the main distinguishment between hope and trust. And so we're going to look more into that and compare Bible passages on that. Okay. So now going on to the whole New Testament, we gave these different resources. I'm just going to give a few quotes here from the Colin Brown dictionary here. So Hoffman does the section on hope in the edited dictionary by Brown. And so he points out that living hope as a fundamental religious attitude was unknown in Greek culture. So that's hope as a religious attitude is kind of unique to the Bible. Yep. Or Old Testament too. And then he also points out that even in the ancient Near East, in the Old Testament times, like he says here, those Babylonians whose prayers have come down to us never called their gods their hope, but an Israelite could pray, "Thou, O Lord, art my hope." And so both of these just point out the difference of the use of hope in the Jewish and Christian context.
Yeah, like outside people didn't use hope for God.
Yeah,
like but we do. That's like a huge basis of Christianity.
Yeah, and like to be fair, there are some Greek, like Plato and the Stoics, will talk about putting hope in the gods, but it's just not as prevalent and pervasive as it is in the Bible. Okay, so in talking about hope in the Old Testament, he says that hope in the Old Testament embraces Yahweh's coming and glory, his reign over a new earth, the conversion of Israel and the nations, and the new covenant based on the forgiveness of sins. So those are kind of all of the different areas of what the Old Testament hope is. And notice that a lot of these are kind of bound to history, or even often kind of the personal life of the believer. They didn't have, the resurrection hasn't happened of Jesus yet. So they didn't kind of have like the hope beyond death type of hope that you see most often in the New Testament. So that's kind of a distinguishing mark between Old Testament and New Testament hope.
It was more like day of the Lord.
Yeah. They had hope in God that he would be faithful to his promises, and restore the nation, judge their enemies, and so on. Where that takes on a different spin in the New Testament.
Yeah, because he has.
So in terms of the New Testament, all the New Testament witnesses are agreed that through the coming of the promised Christ, situation described in terms of hope in the Old Testament has been fundamentally altered. End quote there. So Christ is a big event.
Big
in hope. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. The Septuagint. Morioka says much of the same thing. Here's a different lexicon of the Septuagint that just talks about hope, expectation, basis of one's hope.
So defining it in the same way, basically.
Nothing really new there. In the papyri, we kind of see the same usage as well. There's kind of like a generic use right there. I hope to be quickly promoted, right? Hope used in a non-religious sense. We use it like that too.
Expectation, future expectation, but not towards God.
Yeah. Like this third one here seems to be probably a Christian or Jewish prayer. I hope in God that the Lord wants to comfort me. As we saw, it's not common for other religions to hope in God. So that's evidence that this is probably a Christian papyri.
And these papyri they were just like random notes that people were finding.
Yep. So. Yeah. I mean, it's just a letter, somebody hoping for comfort, And then, okay, in terms of Greco-Roman, so the wider culture, we can use Perseus. So this is elpis, the noun, and you can go to, the whole entry.
More Greek.
And there's a shorter one here that is more cleaned up, but hope, expectation, and you can see this apprehension, fear, right, which we saw earlier. It's more just expectation. It has to be defined as good or bad. And then the verb, kind of a lot of the same. To deem or suppose that, to look for fear. Those are different meanings than what we see in the New Testament.
Yep.
It has a more general use than hope. Notice down here it says to hope in, but all of the examples are from the Bible.
So we're hoping in God still.
Yeah. Most likely. But like they don't give an example outside of the Bible of hoping in someone, really.
So anyway. Right, because this is not a biblical source. This
it gives you more.
It includes it, but it's more than just the Bible.
Yeah.
It's just Greco literature at that time.
Right. So that's evidence of a difference between the biblical usage and
Christian influence in the word as well.
Yep. Okay. So that's kind of our New Testament study, and even some of it dipped into the Old Testament. And so, I forgot TD&T right here. So a couple quotations from TD&T. He points out in Greco-Roman that the most popular story of hope was Pandora's box. So here, Zeus gave man a vessel full of all good things, but man, filled with curiosity, lifted the lid so that all the good things escaped to the gods. And when the lid was put back in, only hope was trapped, man's present comfort.
Hope we get it back.
Well, okay, there's two interpretations. Either Zeus was hiding hope from humans, or it's kind of like everything is chaotic and out of control, but we still have hope. So that
for the good.
Yeah. So those are kind of the two interpretations there. He points out, Bultmann in TD&T, that elpising, the verb, can focus on the sure confidence in some verses, or stress on patient endurance in other contexts. But he says the only point is that we can never isolate a single element. So there's in hope this idea of sure confidence and patient endurance, and it, depending on certain contexts, one of those is emphasized in different ways.
Kind of just looking at it at a different angle and seeing one of them over the other. But they're both at play.
Yep. Okay. So now moving on to the Old Testament.
So how is hope used in the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Starting with the passage. Back to Blue Letter Bible we go.
Back to Blue Letter Bible. And this is harder. This is harder to find some good words. So if you just go to Blue Letter Bible and search hope, go to the lexicon, you get tons of Hebrew words for hope.
How do you know which one to use?
Well, what I actually did, so I looked at how hope was translated. So I looked at the NRSV and where they translated hope, and then I used my Logos Bible software to see what form of the Hebrew that's translating, and then looked at which one is the most common.
Okay, well, how would you recommend something just to have all of these resources to figure out which one to use?
Yeah.
Maybe like if they're looking at a certain passage.
Yeah, it would probably be picking out a certain passage. Yeah, if you go to a specific passage and look up a word, and then if it has lots of uses. So here you can see tikva. It has a number of uses. The same with yahal. If we go to all right here, it has lots of uses.
So you just click through them and see which one was most commonly used.
Yeah. Many of these will have like, it's used 3 times in the Old Testament. And it's like, well, okay, that's probably
not the hope you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So notice here that yahal is mainly to wait or expect, are kind of the definitions there. And tikva here is more hope, expectation. Seems to have the translation of cord in some contexts. But so this is kind of the word I focused on, looked at, but it looks pretty much the same though. You have hope, the ground of hope, and things hoped for, kind of that, the verbal idea and the object idea.
Nouns verbs.
And I didn't do extra on the TWOT, much of the same. Translations then, this is probably the most important thing, is maybe not translations, but just reading, doing the concordance at the bottom. If you scroll down here, right, doing the concordance, reading through all the different uses of hope, and getting a sense for how it's used. With the translations, what you can do, so this is, the Hebrew and Greek, the Latin, the Greek Old Testament, and the Samaritan Pentateuch.
We went through those in our
last we went episode. Through. But if you just search hope, this is where the translation uses, where a translation uses hope. And then you can use this to go and scroll through and compare and contrast the different translations and when they use hope, and get a feel for what are they hoping for? Who's doing the hoping? Why are they hoping? Kind of asking those questions as you go through.
But they're all the same verses though. Like they shouldn't vary that much. Usually not.
I mean, you'll notice like all 3 of them have hope there. 3 of them have hope here, but here only one of them has hope. Here this says, I will trust. So that's just a little different. And the reason is, if we go on to our next Ancient Near Eastern, so looking at TDOT, here it has a section comparing like the different, like the Syriac and the Amharic and so on, how they translate the same root. But here, a couple interesting things that we haven't seen before is that the word, the root that we saw is most similar to hope is not used in the historical narratives, but it's mainly just in the prophets, the Psalms, and wisdom is when hope is discussed.
Not in like Genesis, Exodus.
Yeah, as much.
All of the narrative stuff.
Oh, just interesting fact. And then the Septuagint does not usually translate the verb kava as elpizing.
So the Septuagint does not normally translate the Hebrew verb hope as the Greek word hope.
Right.
What?
Instead, it translates it as mening, which means to like remain or hold fast. And elpizing is mainly used for betach, which we normally translate as trust.
Oh, brother.
And so that's kind of what we saw earlier of the Hebrew had hope, the Greek had trust.
In the Step Bible, like parallel translation.
Yeah. And so it's probably something like this is at the root of that, if you went and looked at the words. So that highlights that hope and trust are overlapping.
Very connected.
Yeah, very connected. And we saw that with Augustine earlier when he talked about how hope is future, trust can be future, but it can also be present as well. Okay.
Interesting.
So having looked at all of these contexts, and there's much more just reading through these and reading through the context, but so kind of just summarizing, I made a chart. So we saw Louw-Nida with its different synonyms and summaries. So I tried to figure out what is the difference between these words.
So are these all of the synonyms?
Not all of them, but kind of
But this list is from there.
It's from there and from other reading and curiosities and so on. So the main thing is they put these two words, to look forward eagerly, to eagerly desire, in kind of the same realm.
Louw-Nida did.
Louw-Nida. And I think the difference between this is elpis and elpizo are like emotions. Like these are emotions that we feel. We feel hope. Where to look forward eagerly isn't an emotion. It's a
state of being almost, or
or just like, this is kind of the difference between expecting something and then hoping for that something. They're waiting for something versus hoping in it.
One's more a little bit concrete than the other.
Yeah. And you can be eagerly waiting for something neutral. It doesn't have to be good, where hope is always for something good. And then the opposite of hope is fear. This came up in several of my readings. So where hope, you're looking for something good, fear, you're afraid of something harmful in the future.
But you're still expecting it. Like in the Old Testament, they were still looking forward or looking towards something fearful
in the future.
Still categorized as hope.
Yeah.
Hoping for something, expecting something.
Oriented towards the future. And if what you're expecting is good, it's hope. If it's bad, it's fear that you're expecting something bad. And then the difference between hope and faith, we already talked about. You can believe in something that is bad. I mean, we do it all the time, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be good. And the orientation can be past, present, or future. And that's the main difference between hope. Usually we have faith in God just as we hope in God. And both of those have a lot of overlap. And we see that in the Old Testament, where trust in God in Hebrew is often translated as hoping in Greek. Yep. In psychological literature, and like philosophy, they try to distinguish between hope and optimism.
Okay.
And it seems like the main difference between hope and optimism is the reasonableness of your hope. Okay. So like, let's say I'm going to a baseball game of my favorite team, and they're playing the best team in the MLB. Okay. I can say, man, I really hope that my team will win, but I'm not very optimistic that they will.
Sure.
Okay. So
it's not reasonable.
It's not reasonable to hope, but I still have that longing.
Yeah.
Right. So that seems to be the main difference between when you say I have hope versus I am optimistic. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So that helps me kind of like orient myself towards, when we say hope, what are we talking about? And so comparing it to the synonyms helps clarify. And then, as we saw, we've talked about a lot of this. Old Testament, hope is usually just in the wisdom and prophets, and it's grounded in God's faithfulness,
Mhm.
and it's more temporal things, like we talked about. It's hoping for his salvation and deliverance in, you know,
'Cause it's
history.
before Jesus.
Yeah, before
It's-
Jesus. In the New Testament, there in the Gospels, hope actually doesn't come up much. So even before Jesus' resurrection,
Sure.
there is some hopes, uses of hope,
His
but
resurrection just changed
it
everything.
just changed everything. And just to point out that there are secular uses of hope, like here, Acts 16:19 says, "But when her owners saw that their hope of making money was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities." Okay. So hope isn't always like a theological word or an important word. It's just the importance of hope depends on its object, what
Right.
you're hoping
What you're
in
hoping
or
in.
hoping for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can hope for anything, right? But it becomes significant in the New Testament because our hope turns in Jesus, our hope for resurrection, our hope in God
Mhm.
is what matters. And then, yeah, it can be used as a verb, a subject, or an objective sense.
And that is all. You can see all that in Blue Letter Bible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. These are all kind of the main objects of New Testament hope.
Like what we're hoping for.
What we're hoping for: resurrection, the restoration of Israel, God's promise, glory of God, salvation, inheritance, eternal life. With their verses, looking at the difference between hope and faith. I have verses here. So Romans 4:18, hoping against hope, he, Abraham, believed that he would become the father of many nations. So notice how his believing is almost defined as hoping against hope. So faith is defined as hope. Okay.
Sure.
In the New Testament.
Not a very optimistic hope, but
well, okay. Seemingly not optimistic, right? So normally, if you're really old and you don't have a son, you don't have much hope,
reasonable
realistic
hope.
hope, but he trusted God,
Mhm.
who can bring, life from death, who can bring something out of nothing, who brings light out of darkness, right?
Mhm.
So that hope transcends, what normal people wouldn't hope in, right? So that's kind of the hoping against hope. He believed God. Both hope and faith are not seen. You see that in Romans 24:5, which says, "Now hope that is seen is not hope." And then Hebrews 11 defines faith as the conviction of things not seen. And then Hebrews 11 also defines faith as, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. So again, faith is defined in terms of hope, which shows just that close connection.
Interesting.
Some translations will say the substance of things hoped for. It's kind of a hard word to translate, but
it's still connected to hope.
Yeah. Right. And so this is where I think you can't hope in something you don't have faith in.
Because it will be the point. There would be no point.
Well, if you don't believe it's going to happen, if you're not expecting it to happen, then you're not hoping for it.
Yeah.
Or
That's the whole point.
think of it in like the opposite, fear, right? If you don't think the bad thing is actually going to happen, you're not going to be afraid.
Sure.
No, you have to have faith that that thing is coming, and that's why you're afraid.
That's why you're afraid.
And that's the same thing with hope. And so that's where I think this is the overlap between faith and hope. Okay? Because it's the substance of the things hoped for, right? The faith gives meaning to your hope, or faith allows you to hope, right? So I think that's the connection between faith and hope.
So kind of faith precedes hope.
Yeah.
How you could summarize that, maybe?
And then this verse was interesting to me because I was kind of hoping And to find in the New Testament, like in our battle against, sin and suffering, that, we can have hope to overcome, or hope that our prayers will work, which I think is true, but hope isn't used in the Bible like that. Elpis and elpising, or for whatever reason. Instead, the opposite is true, where here, character produces hope. I was hoping that it was going to be hope produces character.
Oh, like because you're hoping, then you can endure longer.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Or you can have hope that you'll have a better character in the future.
Sure.
But no, character produces hope. And so I wrestled with this, and then read Chrysostom, his commentary on Romans, and I feel like his take was helpful. So he says here, now no man that has lived an upright life is unconfiding about things to come. As of those who have been negligent, there are many that, feeling the burden of a bad conscience, wish there were neither judgment nor retribution.
Okay, wait, let's summarize that. What did you just say?
It's, old translation. But so he's talking about future judgment. Okay. If you are somebody who has lived an upright life, you can have hope. Right?
Sure.
But if you have been negligent on your life, you're going to wish that there isn't judgment. You're not going to have hope.
Well, because you're
going to have fear. Yeah. And so that's how character produces hope. If you have a good character, it can give you hope for the future.
Sure.
So that's his point.
Okay.
And that makes sense of the passage.
Hope still rooted in the goodness of God because we have a good character.
Yeah.
And are on the winning team. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for translating that.
Okay. And then the last thing here is just that hope produces, or hope leads to action. Like the reason that the authors of scripture say, like, have hope, is to encourage us to do something. Okay. Or it does encourage us to do something. So the main thing that they're encouraging us to do is hold fast, to endure.
Which
endure
we saw
under
that.
persecution. Yeah.
We saw a lot of that, like steadfastness, holding firm.
Yeah.
In our lexicon.
Right. Translated as to hold fast in the Old Testament. That's the main use. They're trying to produce hope in order that their readers will endure this present suffering and looking to the eternal reward.
Yeah.
Another one here, though, 1 Peter 3:15, he encouraged us to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope. So if you have hope, you're going to want to defend it, right? Don't give reasons for your hope. Okay. And 1 John 3:3 says, and all who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. So this is what we saw kind of before with the character produces hope. We want hope. We who have hope will purify ourselves, become holy.
As he is holy.
As he is holy. That's who our hope is in.
Yeah. So it's like we've seen, like, using the lexicons to even just find out where the hope is, or where the word hope is used. It's nouns and verbs, and then looking in that concordance and all of these online dictionaries of just like, what have the experts said about hope? And now we kind of have to like just take them and sort through their meanings and kind of put them together. Like, oh, I'm seeing hope and faith are used together. Oh, hope and character are used together. Like, how are they? And then kind of interpret from there.
Yeah.
And like, what does it mean then? What are we called to do because of this hope in us? All right. Well, that was awesome. So yeah, any of the links in here are clickable, and it all ties back to our podcast episode from last time. Just like how to use a word, how do you do a word study? And yeah, thanks for showing us how to do it.
Awesome.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Bible Toolbox. All of the resources mentioned in this episode are posted on our website, thebibletoolbox.com. There you can also find out more information on how to give and support us. And we have loved all of the encouragement and feedback we've received from you. So thanks so much.